Singapore moves to decriminalise gay sex while protecting the traditional definitions of the family unit. It followed a debate that lasted about 10 hours over 2 days and saw division within the opposition Workers' Party, which lifted the party whip. In the end, 2 Workers' Party MPs and a nominated MP voted against the repeal of Section 377A of the Penal Code, which criminalised sex between men. On the Constitution, which protects the current definition of marriage from legal challenge, 2 other Workers' Party MPs abstained from voting, while 2 non-constituency MPs from Progress Singapore Party were against it.
No change in social norms following the repeal of Section 377A. Social and Family Development Minister Massago Zulkifli with this assurance after questions from 3 MPs. Is among various concerns raised by MPs over the past 2 days, despite overwhelming support for both bills. 6 MPs raised the issue of sex education in schools. One asked how students can be taught to be more understanding. Another on students participating in gay community projects. Mr. Masagos, who's also Minister in charge of Muslim Affairs, says all students are taught to listen to various viewpoints and engage with one another respectfully, even if views should differ. He says sex education here remains secular and based on research and evidence. The Education Ministry's focus is on students' well-being.
I explained in my opening speech that our education policies and curriculum remain anchored on Singapore's prevailing family values and social norms, which most Singaporeans want to uphold. These include the family as the cornerstone of our social fabric and marriage between a man and a woman.
On the government's position on religious freedom, he says there are no plans to legalise same-sex marriage. One also has the right to preach on their beliefs, even if others might disagree. There is also no law to prevent religious organisations from treating same-sex couples differently. But in the workplace, Minister Massago says employment decisions cannot be made because of an employee's support or non-support of causes unrelated to their job performances.
We should keep the marketplace free from the polarizing contestation of values. In a free and open economy, when abundance of choice, businesses can decide what events are allowed on their premises. However, while businesses make their own commercial judgments with regard to their prospective customers, they should do so in a sensitive and respectful manner.
Still, he urges them not to use commerce as a platform to display beliefs and hopes businesses and customers can be gracious. He adds leadership should be exercised to make difficult decisions on complex issues, even if it does not satisfy everyone's wishes.
We are a secular government, and while each of us as individuals may have our religious convictions, we take care to ensure that when we make decisions for the whole country, we apply secular, universal values and not individual religious beliefs.
At the same time, plans to deal with cancel culture are underway. Home Affairs and Law Minister K. Shanmugam says the government is looking at measures to deal with harm caused by cancel campaigns.
We are studying the matter. We are consulting different groups as part of our review. We want to try and strike a right balance. It's not an easy area to deal with or legislate on. We will give more details when we get a sense of what is doable.
Law Minister K. Shanmugam has called out the Workers' Party for not taking a position on the issues debated around 377A. He questioned how such a party would function as a team if they were in charge of running the country. In doing so, Mr. Shanmugam also disputed the Workers' Party's intention of lifting the party whip. Pritam Singh had maintained it allows for a full and honest representation of all views.
The whip does not and has not prevented MPs from speaking their minds. MPs have always been free to express what their constituents think. The whip is relevant for voting, not speaking, and the whip sets out the party's position. In moving the bills, Minister Masagos and I took pains to lay out both sides of the issue. The PAP MPs speaking on the issue too have reflected the concerns, the fears and pain of the many individuals they have spoken with. These include views of Singaporeans from different religious groups, LGBT groups, and others. So do not be mistaken. Views on all sides can and have been and must be fully ventilated, and they have been ventilated by PAP MPs. As I said earlier, the whip is imposed to set out the party's position as a whole. In our Westminster parliamentary system, parties must have a view on important questions that come before Parliament. They need to be honest in this House, say what they think is good for Singapore, and be accountable to the electorate for their decisions. The real point is that the WP as a party does not want to take a stand on this matter. It does not want to be seen as supporting the repeal. At the same time, it also does not want to be seen as opposing the repeal. That way, it hopes to be all things to all men and not too much of anything to anyone.
I think the minister, I refer to Minister Shanmugam, has mischaracterized my speech somewhat. What I said was specific to the party position in 2019, and here there was a context. The party position, as I mentioned, was varied and divided with no consensus as to whether 377A should be repealed. And as I said, somewhat similar to Singapore society. I lifted the whip and did not fetter the voting rights of MPs. I did not say speaking rights. I did not fetter the voting rights of MPs. This is consistent with the party position. What has been the result arising from this debate? 6 for a repeal of 377A, 3 against for reasons of conscience. The party position has now been established by way of a majority in Parliament. On the Constitution, 7 for, 2 abstentions for the reasons the members mentioned. All the Workers' Party MPs, apart from Mr. Faisal Manap, who is down with COVID-19, put their personal positions on the record. And in my view, they behaved like a loyal opposition, not loyal to the PAP, but loyal to Singaporeans, knowing the position of Singaporeans outside of this House.
Mr. Singh then pressed the minister on PAP's position on the fielding of LGBTQ plus candidates in general elections.
In view of the speeches made by PAP MPs over the last 2 days and the call for any change on the definition of marriage to be a political question, can I confirm the PAP's position with regard to LGBTQ plus candidates standing in general elections?
I'm not the Prime Minister or the Secretary General of the party, but my personal view is that anyone who is not a criminal and who is of good character and of sound mind and who can work for the residents ought to be able to stand for elections. In all of this, in a democracy, it also depends on how people are perceived and accepted in society. All of these are relevant considerations. One has got to look at individual candidates.
In scrutinising the Workers' Party's position, Mr. Shanmugam referred to the transcript of Mr. Singh's speech yesterday to debunk his claims that the whip was lifted for democracy.
He said, and I quote, "The People's Action Party has announced that it is not lifting the whip for this debate. Given the very public opinion on the impending repeal of Section 377A, there is a risk that the democratic value of Parliament could be diluted if the views of Singaporeans on this subject are not adequately ventilated in the House." That's the point I was responding to, and that's simply untrue. It's inaccurate, and it does not do this House any credit, because you are entitled to ventilate your views. We have always been ventilating our views, and it should not be thought of in public that if the whip is imposed, you cannot ventilate your views.
Mr. Speaker, that is an accurate rendition of what I said. But immediately after that also, I said not lifting the whip would deny Workers' Party MPs not in favour of a repeal of 377A the opportunity to vote freely, and in doing so to also represent Singaporeans who see this issue as a matter of deep religious belief and conscience. But the Minister is not wrong when he says, even though the whip is not lifted, it's entirely true that members can speak freely. I don't dispute that, Minister.
Social and Family Development Minister Massago Zulkifli also crossed swords with Progress Singapore Party, or the PSP's Hazel Phua. He says MPs should not use a national referendum as an easy solution, just so a potentially difficult decision does not have to be made in Parliament. Ms. Phua had earlier said her party wants the definition of marriage to be decided by national referendum.
Our Constitution sets a very high bar for the holding of referenda. A referendum is required when sovereignty or the command of our armed forces and police is at stake. We have only one referendum in our history on merger with Malaysia. We should be very careful about elevating any matter to this level, saying it is equivalent to an issue on sovereignty. It's the duty of elected MPs to consult, to discuss, and to come to a decision, even and perhaps especially for difficult and polarizing social issues. The PSP says that we should not allow Parliament to decide, but instead let the definition of marriage be decided by national referendum. This might seem seductive, but let's call it what it is. It's an attempt to avoid taking a position as parliamentarians, as elected representatives of the people.
Our position on wanting the definition of marriage to be determined via a national referendum instead of Parliament is not a convenient way to avoid difficult decisions. We feel that this is an issue that is important to many Singaporeans, and there is a high level of interest from the public to have a say in this matter. And since it is an area that does not require any specialized knowledge, which makes it unsuitable for participation from members of the public, we feel that, and actually marriage, as many members have pointed out, is a matter of social norm. We feel that this is an area that is suitable for the public to participate.
I thank the member for the clarification, but I think the most important question is not the referendum, is what is PSP's position on the constitutional amendment? Are they for or against? And therefore, when the referendum, if held, are they for or against?
We will support a constitutional amendment if it says that the definition of marriage is to be determined via national referendum.
Then we'll wait for the train to crash on us.
Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong says that he is very happy that Parliament passed these laws to decriminalise sex between men and protect the definition of marriage from constitutional challenge. In a Facebook post, he called this a major milestone for Singapore. He says that this is a deeply sensitive issue that could easily have become a very divisive one. He says that, more importantly, the nation got to this point together, calmly and with all sides showing restraint and listening to one another. He adds that those with different viewpoints have accepted compromises to achieve a good result. He says that the way that the delicate matter was handled gives him confidence that the outcome will be well accepted. Now, even though other difficult issues are bound to arise in the years to come, Mr. Lee says that the country can tackle them with the same spirit while remaining united.